All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to break down a pretty controversial source that looks at modern dating less like a romance and more like a strategic game. And it claims that if you want to understand it, you first have to know the plays. So, this source we're looking at, it kicks things off with this really bold statement. It's basically saying, hey, those dating frustrations you feel, they might not be simple miscommunications. Instead, it suggests they could be deliberate strategies or plays in a pretty high-stakes game. So in this explainer, our job is to break down the 10 specific plays that this source describes. Now, just to be super clear, we're not here to endorse this viewpoint. We're just here to unpack the arguments so you can understand the perspective it's presenting. Let's dive in. Okay, so the source breaks these plays down into three big categories. And the first one it calls the visual game. As you can probably guess, this is all about curating appearance. And within this visual game, the guide gets specific. It points to three moves: the makeup mirage, figure as illusion, and the camera lies. Let's get into what each of those actually means. First up, the makeup mirage. The source uses this pretty intense term war paint to talk about makeup. The argument here isn't just about simple enhancement. It frames cosmetics as a powerful kind of personal marketing, skillfully creating a very specific look. Sticking with this idea of presentation, we get to figure as illusion. Here, the focus is on things like shapewear and tailored clothing. The source's claim is blunt, that a seemingly perfect figure can actually be the result of what it calls pure engineering, a carefully constructed silhouette. And the final play in this visual game is one that, let's be honest, we've all probably seen: the camera lies. The argument is that social media profiles are basically highlight reels, right? They use specific angles, lighting, and a whole lot of editing to build a digital version of a person that might not quite line up with reality. Okay, so we've covered the visual stuff. Now the guide shifts from what you see to what people do. This brings us to the second category, the action game, and it's all about analyzing specific behaviors. Now, this is a classic dating dilemma, isn't it? Is she playing hard to get, or is she just not interested? Well, this source claims it's almost always the second one. It suggests that what might look like being coy is actually a strategy to keep you orbiting, close enough to be an option, but not actually getting any closer. The action game also digs into two other alleged plays, something called the helpless act and using social media as an ego playground. So with the helpless act, the guide basically flips the common perception on its head. It argues that acting helpless isn't a sign of weakness at all, but a power move. The goal, according to this, is to make you feel needed, to trigger that desire to help, which in turn makes you more likely to give your time and energy. And when it comes to social media, the source claims those seemingly personal selfies are often for a much bigger audience. The idea isn't to impress one specific person, but to gather up likes, get validation, and maybe keep a few backup options warm. The message is kind of harsh. You're just one of many people hitting that like button. All right, so we've gone from visuals to actions. Now we're moving into what the source calls the most complex part of all, the mind game. This is where it claims the real psychological tactics come into play. A key tactic it describes is the mentioning other men play. The source breaks it down like this. First, a story gets dropped about other guys showing interest. The point? To create a sense of high demand. And the intended results, it claims, is to spark your competitive side and make you chase even harder. The guide also points to two other so-called mind games. First, using tears during an argument. It frames this not as just emotion, but as a tool to completely shut down logic and switch on your sympathy. Second is selective memory, which it calls a form of brand control, strategically forgetting things from the past to protect her own image. And the last mind game we'll cover here challenges that classic "he's like a brother to me" dynamic. The guide suggests that this friend can sometimes be more of an emotional backup, an orbiting placeholder, just to make sure there's always another option on standby. So, we've walked through these 10 alleged plays across visuals, behaviors, and psychology. What's the bottom line here?
What does the source want you to take away from all this?
Well, the source's final piece of advice is about what it calls the real playbook. And the number one rule is pretty simple. Pay way more attention to actions than you do to words. It's really a call to watch for observable patterns over just listening to what someone says. And here is a really crucial point the guide makes. It stresses that this isn't about all women. But, and this is the core of its argument, when these behaviors do pop up, they should be seen as strategic and totally intentional, not just some accident or misunderstanding.
In the end, the source actually turns the whole thing back on its audience, asking them to think about their own experiences. So we'll leave you with that same provocative question to think about. Have you seen any of these plays out in the wild? So what do you think? It's a lot to process. We break down complex and, let's face it, often controversial topics like this one all the time. If you appreciate explainers that just get straight to the point, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Thanks for tuning in.